Hello and welcome to our podcast on characters in Hollywood. As we are moving through our analytical structure of class of dissecting film into 3 levels, this is a literary level event. So this is a trait of film that film has in common with literature. We have to have characters to inhabit the plot and to do something. And so we wanted to talk about characters in general, but also how characters are developed in Hollywood films. So here we go. So first off, why do we focus on characters? Well, the point of storytelling is to tell that story, to teach that lesson, to develop that theme. And so a character has to do that. That character is bringing the author's comment to life. That character has to go on the hero's journey, be challenged, be aided by a mentor, overcome adversity, or not overcome adversity, but we have to have a character to inhabit the story and to do something. And then we can observe how that character grows, changes, doesn't, how they react to pressures, and that helps to reveal the lesson that we are supposed to learn from a text, and that is theme. This is why we read literature, this is why we go to plays, this is why we watch movies. It is to learn something about ourselves and to learn something about our world, and oftentimes those lessons come through the characters. And so a quick review from literature class, because this is a literary level piece, that the characters in film are very similar to characters in literature. So we're going to have static characters, just like we do in literature class. These are characters who don't fundamentally change throughout a text. It could be because they're just a minor character. They just help out our main character to grow, and they're kind of a mentor or an ally. It could be that they are some sort of evil force in the story and they are unable to change. Or they could be the old, wise mentor character who doesn't need to change because that character did all of their changing in some previously released text. And so when we see, for example, Yoda in the Star Wars series, Yoda doesn't change. Yoda is static. That character has done all of its growing in some other text. But that's going to be a static character in film, just like we have in literature. Now, we also have to consider that their lack of growth can teach us something, and that something is going to be pointing towards a theme. Why doesn't Voldemort change when he should have? Why doesn't Yoda change? What can we learn from their lack of change? It's a little difficult to understand sometimes when we talk in the abstract, but as we start to apply this to actual real characters, we'll see Voldemort probably should have learned something. And whatever he should have learned, we can certainly learn ourselves. And so a static character can help reveal a theme of a text. Just like lit class, we're going to have dynamic characters. And these are the characters who do undergo a fundamental change. Not a character who goes from living to dead, like, oh, they've changed, we should learn something. That's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about a character who is typically on that hero's journey, who has been challenged, who has been helped by others, who grows, who sees a better self within themselves and becomes that better character, who becomes more intelligent or more hardworking or more thorough or more committed or whatever, whether that's Nina in Black Swan or Wildstyle in the Lego movie or Frodo in his journey through the Lord of the Rings series. These characters grow, not just aging or growing up, but they learn, they develop, they become more of something. And their growth and change can then teach us something. Whatever pushed them to grow and learn, we can learn from as well. Perhaps we have to learn to be more forgiving. We have to learn to be more committed. We have to learn to be more hardworking. Whatever the characters learn and grow because of, we can learn from that as well. And typically, just like in literature class, we're going to have foil pairs in films. And these are defined by contrasting and clashing pairs of characters. So their differences and how they interact can help teach us something. So Lightning McQueen and Mater, the characters from The Heat, the characters from Nothing to Lose, multiple different foil pairs within the Harry Potter series. These are characters who are quite opposite from each other. They could be one is focused, one is not focused. One is very logical, one is very emotional. Regardless of how they clash, if we have characters who are clashing, they are a foil pair. And then we have to observe them. How do they behave throughout the course of the movie? Do they, as we say, do they come together? Do they start on opposite ends of a spectrum, and by the end of the movie, they are friends? They have learned from each other. They have grown together. We could learn something from that. Or Are they a foil pair that has stayed at odds? Why do they hate each other at the beginning of the movie? And they still hate each other at the end? What has caused them to not come together? What should they have learned throughout the course of this film? Whatever they should have learned, yet didn't, is probably what we should have learned. Harry Potter and Voldemort have hated each other from the beginning, and 8 movies later, they still don't like each other. They are a foil pair that stays at odds. Now, what could they have learned over the course of 8 movies? Probably more for Voldemort than for Harry Potter, but what could he have learned? What should he have learned? We can then figure that out and deduce and analyze and interpret and go, hey, Voldemort probably should have learned to not be a jerk. Maybe I, as a human being, should learn to not be a jerk. And so we have static characters, dynamic, foil pairs as well. So let's now add some nuance here and look at characters in movies. How do movies typically develop these static, dynamic, and foil pairs? So first thing, in terms of character traits, characters' traits are set at their first viewing on screen, and characters must follow these traits. So for example, the first time we've ever seen Darth Vader on film was episode 4, when he is taking over some ship. And he comes in, starts pushing people around with the Force, starts strangling people, starts killing people right away, and won't take no for an answer. We are to assume that since we first saw him on screen as being a bully and a mean character, we are to assume he's going to be a mean character forever, unless we see something that changes them. If we have a character who's exceptionally insecure, we are going to assume that they're going to stay insecure unless we see them grow and change and become more secure. So to put it back in the literature class lingo, we must assume that characters are static unless proven otherwise. You can't have the characters from Dumb and Dumber who, the first time we see them, they're not real smart. They're not real well put together. They don't really understand reality. We cannot see them at the end of the movie defusing bombs, getting into Harvard, getting into any academic institution. That just doesn't seem authentic and genuine. Now, if in the course of the movie we saw them reading, we saw them taking an online course, we saw them bettering themselves, and then they got to Harvard, we might be able to buy that. But unless we see it happening on screen, we assume characters are static. But if we do see them bettering themselves, learning from their mistakes, then they can become those dynamic characters that we just talked about. And this is what we alluded to. Character change must be explained why and how. So we would not accept characters to behave in a random fashion without any clear reasons. Like, they have to follow this pattern of typical growth. We have to see what they're learning. We have to see how it affects them. We have to see how they change. For example, we have Jenny from Forrest Gump. We see her growth. She starts off the film as the one nice kid to Forrest Gump. She lets him sit down with her on the bus. She asks him questions. She becomes his only friend. By the end of the movie, she is a more complete character. She realizes her importance in the world, her importance to Forrest Gump. She agrees to marry him. We can't assume that the child on the bus would logically become this full and developed character by the end. But when we're watching Forrest Gump, we can see all of the challenges that Jenny faces. We can see her running away from an abusive home. We can see her hitchhiking. We can see her going to San Francisco and engaging in the hippie culture for a while. We can see her doing drugs. We can see all the things that have pushed her to become a better person than she already was, to see her become a person who would be willing to love Forrest in return. And so we have to see those events. If we don't see Jenny struggling with addiction, struggling with potential suicide, then it doesn't make any sense how this nice little kid would become the Jenny that she is at the end of the movie. So we assume she's static, but once we see these events that change her, we can buy her potential change into a dynamic character. Another example comes from the movie The Heat, and here we have a foil pair. We have Sandra Bullock's character, Ashburn, who follows the rules. She's an FBI agent. She follows the rules. She plays it by the book. She does everything as it should be. She is paired with Melissa McCarthy's character, or Mullins, who is a character who doesn't want to follow any of the rules as a cop. She breaks them all. She cuts the corners. She fudges the reports. So they clearly are a foil pair at the start. And by the end, we can see that they're working together. They're on the same page. They're about to break open this crime syndicate because they've evolved to working together. So as a foil pair, they start off at complete odds, complete opposite ways of solving crime. And by the end, they are a foil pair that has come together. They have learned from each other. Ashburn learns that sometimes you can cut the corners. You can break a few rules. Mullins learns from Ashburn that sometimes the rules are there for a good reason, and she becomes a better cop because of it. They both become better cops. They've started off at opposite ends, they've come together. The point is, if those characters are going to change, we have to see the events that pull them together. We have to see Ashburn and Mullins go to Mullins' apartment, and now they understand each other better. We have to see them go to the nightclub, get a little out of control, tell goofy stories, need each other to survive. We need to see at the very end where Mullins is kind to Ashburn about her high school yearbook where nobody signed it. She doesn't treat her in a bad way. She's kind to her. They've both softened their edges, and that allows us to accept that this foil pair that started off so antagonistic has come together, and they can now work together by the end. So we definitely want to see Hollywood characters who are real people, characters who are round. And what we mean by that is characters who have undergone change. They are the dynamic characters. We want them to start one way and get smarter, or get more compassionate, or more empathetic, or more determined, or to right their lives. We want them to have depth and be real people, that they can make mistakes and learn from them and improve and increase their affect in the world. Whether it's a character from Schindler's List or Pretty Woman or American History X or the Godfather series, we want our main characters to be somewhat realistic and to be able to see them grow, which makes them literarily dynamic. They've gone on the hero's journey, they've grown, they've gotten better. Hollywood wants those characters out there, and we as an audience want them there too. We also mentioned this point in the Plot Stages podcast, but most times in Hollywood films, characters have a double goal orientation. So our main character who's about to go on this hero's journey, that character is going to leave their ordinary world and be pushed to do something, to better themselves, to accomplish a goal, to win a game, to get the arc, to cross the ocean, whatever they're going to do. Typically, the film structure pushes a double goal on that main character. So yes, they need to get the arc, but they also reconnect with an old flame. Yes, they need to cross the ocean on the Titanic, but they now have to figure out how to have a relationship with this other girl. This is that double goal where the primary goal of the main character exists. They have to accomplish something, but now they have to deal with usually a love interest and figuring out how to accomplish goal A while also negotiating a relationship along the way. That's pretty typical in most films that we're going to see. So quick examples, you have the proposal where the original goal of Andrew and Margaret was to have a fake wedding so that Margaret could stay in the country because she was here illegally from Canada. And so they set up this fake wedding, this fake trip to Andrew's parents to explain all this. That is the goal, keep her in the country and advance his career. But of course, the double goal then comes out that they actually start to fall in love with each other. Another example from The Departed. I mean, you could look at this movie and be like, man, gangster movie, undercover cop movie, a lot of killing, a lot of swearing, a lot of craziness. That's the main goal for the Matt Damon character, to figure out how all of this underworld crime syndicate is happening. That could be exciting enough as a movie, giving a lot of challenge to a police character to figure all this out. But of course, we then introduce the double goal, a love interest in the character of Madeline. Not like Matt Damon doesn't have enough to deal with in this police story, figuring out all the intricacies of who's deceiving who, but now we have a love interest that's added into the mix. And so that is a typical character structure. And so just to summarize real quick, all of the rules of literature class still exist. That's why we talk about this in the literary level of our class study. So when you've looked at static, dynamic, and foils in all of your literature classes, those rules still apply. But we add a couple things to make it the cinematic experience. Traits must remain consistent. We like those characters to be realistic. Any change has to be explained. It doesn't make sense for a character who's really not all that smart to be, being a rocket scientist by the end, unless we see what has changed them. We like those round, realistic, dynamic characters that typically have that double goal orientation that helps us move through the hero's journey, helps us move through the 4 plot stages, and is a typical pattern that we're going to see in film. And as always, we have to look at these characters, how they change, how they don't change, why, etc., and figure out what do they learn while in this text or on this journey, and therefore what should we learn by them being on this journey. And that gets us closer to an interpretation of theme. Like, what can we learn from Black Swan? What can we learn from The Departed, Footloose, or whatever? Oftentimes we get some good clues when we really focus on characters and apply these patterns that are pretty typical across most movies. That's about it. Thanks so much. As always, if you have any questions, please bring those into class, and we will see you soon.